Hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to the Critique of the Week for Friday, March 19th. Thanks so much for joining me. Sorry I was a minute late. Windows 10 updated on my computer and the microphone wasn't working, so I had to figure out what was going on and reinstall some driver or something. But anyway, it only took an extra minute or two, so I'm glad you could stick with me for that. Hello to James Cicillo, Aaron Cloyd, good to see you. Mark Grinier, nice to see you as well. Over on YouTube, we've got Warren Nedvornik, Sally D, hello to you as well. As always, please do click the like button. Make sure you share it wherever you're watching this. It really helps to do that. It'll make sure it ends up higher ranked in the algorithm and then sent to more people if you click on something right now. So please do that. Now, as always, the critique of the week is a sort of a chance to give that workshop experience to people who might not have access to workshops and gather around and go over poems and let the poets know what a stranger, how the poems appear through a stranger's eyes. So please do leave as many comments as you can as thoughts come to mind about the poem. Pay attention to where you're following them, where you're not, all that kind of stuff, and let everybody know. We'll talk about these poems. Now, next Friday is the last Friday of the month, which means we'll do another drawing. So no matter where you're watching this too, you will see the link to Submittable where you can enter into the drawing so you can participate in the critique of the week yourself next week when we do a drawing for the month of April. I think there are about 80 people in there, so your odds are 4 out of 80. But everybody will get drawn eventually. It's a 5% chance if you do the quick math. Okay, let's get to this. Now, today's poet is Spartakos Anagnostaras. And here we go. Oops, let me see. I'm going to flip this off too. Okay. And here we go. So this is the poem for the first of two poems. Man, all my settings are reset. I didn't notice this either. Hang on. Oh, why did I have to update things? So we'll put myself back over here. And this looks really washed out. Let me change the... fix this camera a little bit. Turn down the contrast a little. That's a little better. Okay, so here is the first poem we're going to do. This is Paintings of Children on a Pavement. Interesting title to start with. Words made of earth, water, salt, and poetry. Voices of frogs and seagulls chatting loudly. Life near water. Worshipping every sound of a wave. Rivers drying up of ideas, deserts looking for the endless sky, demons shining like constellations, thorns of roses more red than the red blood. City without people, empty city roads, more empty than my small cup of coffee in the cold morning. Every roof dressed with a metallic scarecrow extending its arms to feel the dark clouds and crows far away from a green cornfield. Perhaps that's why nobody is outside. Perhaps that's why I am scared to look the sky. And I prefer staring at paintings of children on a pavement after they finished praying, because I prefer staring at the future. Interesting. So that was Paintings of Children on Pavement by Spartakos. I think this is still too washed out. Maybe I'll turn on the gain or something too. I'm sorry for the hold up. Figure video. Let's see. Backlight. Oh, the gamma is a little high maybe. Okay. That's better. It's kind of brighter over on one side. All right. So... now, as I mentioned, I do like the title. The title is interesting enough that makes me curious to read. Paintings of Children on a Pavement. And that is kind of interesting. It on a pavement is not something you'd expect. So maybe, and then pavement too. So paintings of children is something that's sort of quite common, I'd say. Or just, something normal. But then on a pavement is a strange finish to that, which makes me curious about what's going on in this poem. Worlds made of earth, water, salt, and poetry. That's kind of an abstract way to start. I don't know I don't know. We're not really placed well within the poem. And then we have these strong stops at the end of each, or most of the lines. Some of them have enjambment. So we're sort of, we don't have a subject yet. Worlds made of earth, water, salt, and poetry. The voices of frogs and seagulls chatting loudly. So we're starting with the second line, starting to paint the scene here. Life near water, worshipping every sound of a wave. Rivers drying up of ideas. Deserts looking for the endless sky. I like that line. Deserts looking for the endless sky. Demons shining like constellations. Thorns of roses more red than the red blood. So, I don't know. I'm kind of going in and out of feeling connected and then feeling a little lost in this poem here. So, rivers drying up of ideas. The abstraction of ideas is interesting, but it doesn't leave me, it doesn't leave me anywhere. Deserts looking for the endless sky. For some reason, I like that line. Demons shining like constellations. So I imagine this desert sky with the stars and, the constellations. Then thorns of roses, more red than red blood. So there's a sort of landscape, somehow a desert with roses. A city without people. Empty city roads, more empty than my small cup of coffee in the cold morning. So now we're back. Now we're to a city. It was a desert. Now it's a city with empty roads, few people, a cold morning. Maybe it's a desert city. Every roof dressed with a metallic scarecrow extending its arms. I like every roof dressed. There's a good break there. And then that's a good description too. So that paints a picture again. To feel the dark clouds and crows far away from a green cornfield. Okay. Perhaps that's why nobody is outside. Perhaps that's why I'm scared to look. I think maybe at the sky should be in there. To look at the sky or into the sky or something. And I prefer staring at paintings of children on pavement after they finish playing. Because I prefer staring at the future. So I like the ending. It's a good last line. The poem, though, feels to me, I'm just not sure what to take from it. There's parts that I like. There's certain lines that I like that are good descriptions. And I like where it goes with the ending, but I'm not sure. So the speaker enters pretty late. I think my cup of coffee is the first time the speaker appears. And a small cup of coffee in the cold morning is a bit of a cliche. So that's not a really evocative appearance for the speaker. And it's more than halfway through the poem that the I appears. And the problem is I don't know how the I relates. I'm not sure what to take from the poem. My small cup of coffee in the cold morning. Every roof dressed with a metallic scarecrow. So I'm imagining the, TV antennas and things like that, extending their arms up there on the roofs to feel the dark clouds and crows far away from green cornfields. So to feel, who's feeling? Extending its arms. I guess it's the metallic scarecrow extending its arms to feel the dark clouds and crows far away from a green field. So the scarecrows on the roof are feeling the dark clouds. See, I'm having trouble just figure out what to like what it means. Like what I'm supposed to feel about these scarecrows trying to feel something in these faraway green cornfields. They're nice descriptions, but they're not really tied to any emotion or anything. Perhaps that's why nobody is outside. So why? Why is nobody outside? It's just a little hard to follow. There's a good pacing too, I should mention. Anytime I see poems that have these long lines that all end in periods, just out of the corner of my eye, I kind of think it's not going to work, because usually those poems end up really flat. But this poem has a nice rhythm and pacing to it, where these lines with the hard stops really work. So it's got some things going for it, but it's not giving me enough to go with. So why? And that's the thing. So this is just a perfect example of that. So we have this little scene painted, this image of the metallic scarecrows or antennas stretching out. But why is nobody outside? Is it just because there's dark clouds? I mean, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what to take away from that. Perhaps that's why I'm scared to look at the sky. So I don't know why the speaker is scared to look at the sky. So both these things are questions that I don't have any answers for. And they're like the central questions to the poem, right? Like that why. Why am I scared to look at the sky? I'm not sure. And I prefer staring at paintings of children on a pavement after they finish playing, because I prefer staring at the future. I do like staring at the future, though. This is surprising. Really, right here, you can see there's a surprise there. Oops, surprise. That's how you spell it. I don't really expect staring at the future to come. So it's a good, that's why it works as the last line. Sally D says, I take the poem as a dystopia or apocalyptic poem. It also may be a COVID poem. Yeah, I'm not sure. Or maybe like depression. I don't know. It's hard to figure out if it's being literal. It's hard to figure out what to make of it, I would say. Let me see what people are saying on Facebook. So James Asilla says, am I correct that it is a painting by children? Oh, maybe it is. Like paintings of children, as in like the children made the paintings on the pavement. So they're making like chalk drawings on does that change anything? I prefer staring at paintings of children on a pavement after they are finished playing, because I prefer staring at the future. So yeah, I think James is right. I think they're not paintings of children, but they're paintings by children. And then that kind of fits in. So it's a deserted landscape. The speaker is drinking coffee in a cold morning, looking out at the emptiness, the sort of bleakness, the deserty, the endlessness, the demons of the stars and all that stuff. And it's like a deserted place with these scarecrow arms and the dark clouds. And then just so I think maybe instead of paintings of children on a pavement, maybe staring at the paintings children left on the pavement, and then we could really see that really clearly. So instead of even by, I would say left on the pavement. And then there's that sense of leaving too, which adds to, I think, what is going for it. So left on the pavement is what I would say in this spot. But I'm still not sure what to take away as far as the meaning of the poem, though. Let me keep going down. Let's see. So Sharon Frente likes the title. Marianne Carr doesn't care for the coffee cup line. Yeah, it's a little cliche. It's one of those things that appear in so many. We have a couple good. There's one really great poem by, who is that by? Sarah Pemberton Strong, I think, about a cold cup of, I guess it was tea, but very few times you can pull it off in poems these days. Let's see. Mark A. Grenier says, metallic scarecrow reminds me of old-style TV antennas on roofs. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Old-fashioned TV antennas. There's no one outside because of COVID, says Karen Harvey. The apocalyptic fallout. Mark A. Grenier says this may be a pandemic isolation poem. Sharon Ferrante says, cool ending, but where are we? And so, see, everyone's trying to guess what the poem, like what to take away from the poem. We're all kind of, interestingly, we're all engaged, I think, by the rhythm of it and by that there are images and we can place ourselves within it. But it's just a matter of what to make of it, how to interpret it. It feels, just hands off. I want to know more about what the poem's really about, Let's see. Aaron Cloyd says, if the author is not preferring the lifeless cities, I'm not sure if the paintings accurately portray a sense of life. The children are gone there. Yeah, like maybe the children coming back is the point. I don't know. It's really hard to give suggestions about this because I'm not sure what the intent or where it's going is meant to be. Let's see. Kim Tedder says, I think after they finished playing or maybe after they left. Yeah, that's what I was just saying. I think you beat me to it. MP Carver, are the stanzas up above images from the real world contrasted against the paintings on pavement? Or are they descriptions of the painting on pavement? That's a great question. And maybe that could be a way to make the poem sort of reveal a little more that it's holding back right now, is like, what are those paintings of? That might be a thing that could tell us something more. Because I just don't know what to take away from this one. So that's the only problem. I like the rhythms of it. I like the way the images unfold. But there's that one cliched area. But mostly I like I'm engaged in the poem. I just don't know what to make of it by the time I'm over. And with the first person appearing so late, it's really hard to know who the poem matters to in a weird way too. So I think being more open in this poem and sort of letting what you're aiming at be more clear by the end is the main piece of advice here, I think, because we don't really know. Let's see. In Maribade, Carr says it feels a bit distant, impersonal. Yeah, that's the thing. Like the Mai appears, and I don't know if it's literal. I mean, if it's literally an apocalyptic thing, or if it's like a emotional state that makes it appear this way. I just don't know how to take the poem, and so I don't know. Like some feelings are evoked, but they're sort of disembodied because the poem, like Maribade said, is too impersonal to feel connected to it. Warren Nedvornik says, I like the dark clouds and crows far away from a green cornfield. Reminds me of that Van Gogh painting. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it does. They're very, very moody and atmospheric images. Let's see. Oh, and one thing I should mention too, I'm not sure why, why is there this line is so long. Why not break it there? It's just, the thing about, if you have, so no matter what kind of poem you're writing, you're sort of establishing expectations. So I'm expecting a lot of the lines to end in hard breaks. I'm expecting lines of about this length. And that's just what expectations are being built up as I read the poem. It's something you don't really think of, but it's there in the back of your head. So when you get to a long line like this, you end up kind of thinking like, why is this line so long when all the others are not? And it just distracts a little bit. So I would just make a break there or somewhere and pull that down. I think the poem's going for 4 stanzas, but or 4 line stanzas, I should say. But I don't see really why that matters much. I mean, you could pull a line down and then make the last stanza a single line, which would be good because it's a good ending. So that could work kind of line. But we need more content for this poem anyway. Let's look at the other one. I think that's probably all we can say about this. This is the shadow of the poem. The shadow of a poem. And again, this is Spartakos Anagnostaras. The shadow of a poem. A poem is the need to find the time to look life. I think look at life. I think it might be another typo. My poems are dreams suffocating behind high walls of unwelcomed... Oops, I'm flinging my cap away. My poems are dreams suffocating behind high walls of unwelcoming cities. My dreams are clocks ticking in the darkness like metronomes. My dreams are poetry. Poetry like the ghosts chasing lost aspirations in life. Poetry like the shadow of liberty dreaming, the light in the darkness. Poetry like the young deer interrupting its grazing to catch sight of an unexpected visitor. Poetry like the trees without leaves in winter. Poetry like a fairy tale without dragons and witches. Poetry like the spectators of the theater of absurd, waiting for the opening of the stage curtain. Poetry like the sunbeam trying to travel through the clouds. Poetry like the light waiting to be seen. So again, this poem, and the other poem I thought of but didn't really mention, there's a way that it feels very... very spontaneous, like the author doesn't really know where they're going, in a good way though, where you could sort of feel the poet surprising themselves maybe, and this poem too, so the shadow of a poem is a title with a period too, which is an interesting choice. It's sort of a vague and general type title, doesn't draw me in as much as the other title, but it's a title that can work, I guess. A poem is the need to find the time to look at life, I think. My poems are dreams suffocating behind high walls of unwelcoming cities. That's a very evocative image, and it makes you wonder, what about the poems? Just this idea of dreams suffocating behind high walls of unwelcoming cities. That's a good symbolism there, and it makes you think about what it really means, but in a very visual, an immediate kind of way. So that's a good line. My dreams are clocks ticking in the darkness like metronomes. So everything's always ticking like a metronome is a very common. So to combine that together is kind of cliche. And then we have shadow and darkness. We have these dreams. repeating, another dreaming here. A lot of repetition that isn't really adding much. So I wonder if you could pull some of that out and just continue sentences longer instead of repeating my dreams and things like that so much. My dreams are clocks ticking. Clocks ticking are also kind of a cliche. That's just a way of describing it that's very... I wonder if you could... I'm just wondering if there's a way you could combine clock and metronome that makes it interesting. Like the clocks like metronomes in the dark. My dreams are, what if that was just a line? My dreams are clocks like metronomes in the dark. I think it's a little more interesting than as it's constructed here with a ticking. It's sort of telling you what the comparison is already. My dreams are poetry. And so we're back up to talking about poetry. And this, I wonder if you can this doesn't really add much. I don't know if you need that. Poetry like the ghosts chasing lost inspirations of life. Poetry like the shadow of liberty. Again, we're dreaming the light and the darkness. Again, where the dark keeps repeating. And every time you repeat words like this, they just sort of lose a little bit of power. Unless there's sort of two kinds of... There's two kinds of repetition. There's one kind of repetition where you're like gaining power by like modifying the way the repeated words are being used. And so, and like there's sort of this like recitation kind of feel that can come up sometimes if you do it right. But here it feels more like the images are just reappearing and the shadow reappears again. So we just have this lightness and darkness and shadow over and over again in a way that's not really adding anything. But then poetry like a young deer interrupting its grazing to catch sight of an unexpected visitor. I don't know if that is necessary either. What if just a young deer interrupting its grazing and just ended there? I think that might be a little stronger. Then we can imagine why it interrupted its grazing. Instead of telling us, we can sort of, imagine the possibilities there. Poetry like trees without leaves in winter. I love the sounds of this line. I think this is a really good line, actually. Poetry like the trees without leaves in winter. That rhyme in there and the rhythm of it really works well. Poetry like the trees without leaves in winter. Poetry like a fairy tale without dragons and witches. So again, a fairy tale always has dragons and witches. It doesn't really add much because it's just sort of a routine kind of idea. So this, so see how this line, this winter line, because we get the image of it, we get to see the trees without leaves, and sort of the image conjures itself, like it forces itself into your mind's eye, which is what images do, in a way that we sort of forget for a second that it's poetry. So we see the image, trees without leaves in winter, and then we say, oh yeah, that's what poetry is. How is poetry like that? And it's a very engaging way to write. Your mind's really on every level in this line. But then here, poetry like a fairy tale without dragons is like the opposite. There's no image here, so we don't get to really see much. I mean, there's dragons and witches, but just generically. And so, and then fairy tales, it's just nothing on, after you get to the fairy tale, this is just expected. So there's really not a lot to like sink your teeth into, so to speak, with this line. So see the difference between the two lines, how one line really works and the other doesn't? That's something to always keep in mind. Poetry like the spectators of the theaters of absurd, waiting for the opening of the stage curtain. I don't know if you need stage curtain, but curtain, just pull that up. That's interesting. Again, this is a line where we get, similar to the trees and the leaves, we get these spectators in the theater of the absurd, which makes it more interesting than just regular theater, waiting for, so there's this anticipation. Poetry like the sunbeam trying to travel through the clouds. Again, this is a bit cliche, so we keep going in and out of these interesting lines and cliches. Poetry like light waiting to be seen. So again, we get the light. So the light and the darkness keep coming over and over again. Here's the one where I think it works the most, and maybe if the poem sort of funneled into that, it might work. But anyway. And so this poem seems like a kind of a riff, very spontaneous and interesting at times, but again, I'm not sure what made this poem need to be written? And where's the author here? Or where's the reader? Where is, I guess you should have the author more. I mean, the author's here with my dreams, right? But we don't get to see the author. We don't get to know anything about what the dreams are, really. Again, it's very distanced. And let's see. So, I don't know, this kind of feels similar to the other poem, where I'm drawn in by certain lines and certain images, but I'm not sure what to take away at the end. Like, how am I changed after having read this poem? Like, what will I think of differently? That's what's sort of missing. Will I think of poetry differently? I think maybe that's the intent. So meta poetry about poetry. But have I really, has something changed my view of poetry for having read this? I'm not so sure. So again, it feels like the other poem, very, very held back and distant from us. It's not really letting us into what it wants to say or share. And that's kind of what feels like is missing to me. Let me see. Nate Jacobs says, waiting for Godot is absurd theater, waiting and waiting, but nothing happens. Yeah, and that is the theater of the absurd. That's a good point. But kind of, I don't know if it's intentional, but that's kind of what the poem does, or what both poems really do. If either of these poems ended in a way where everything sort of made sense, and we sort of felt like there was a reason for being taken on this little journey that a poem is, then I think they would work. But it's the kind of the sense that we're waiting for Godot kind of, and Godot never shows up is the issue to me, I think, why it doesn't really resonate. Let me see. So Sharon Ferranti says, let me take poetry like dragons and witches, spectators in the theater. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, so let me read again. So Sharon Ferranti sort of combines these into a suggested line, I think. Let me take poetry like dragons and witches, spectators in the theater. So that jumps around in a way that you're not expecting, which would work a little better. Mary Ellen Carr says, end on the second to last line. Poetry like the sunbeam trying to travel through the clouds. It's a cliche kind of line, though. I don't know, like I'm just waiting, like it doesn't feel done. Like keep going, I guess. One way to write that really works is just sort of like keep pushing. Like there's a whole technique. There's method writing, which Jack Grapes teaches. And what you do is you kind of get into character. I mean, speaking of theater, it kind of reminds me of that. But the idea is that you get into character as you're writing the poem. And then you just keep writing in that character. And so the writing itself sort of propels you forward. And so in this method writing class that Jack teaches, it's like method acting. That's the whole idea. Jack Grapes is a LA actor and writer too. And he argues for sort of just like writing, like don't stop, just keep going, find a voice. That's what he always talks about, is like finding a voice and then keep pushing that voice as far as it'll speak. And then eventually you'll have a whole page full of words that you can use more of to craft into a poem or a story or whatever you really want to write. You can sort of like listen to your own voice as it develops, and then it'll tell you something, and then that tells you what you want to write about. And both of these two poems feel like they're doing that, but finished too soon. So, oops, I don't know. Why am I so sloppy? Keep going. Just keep going with this as far as you can. Like, never stop. Don't think about it. And find I feel like there's something deep inside the subconscious or whatever that wants to say something with both of these poems. I just feel like it ended too early to get to the meaning of it. Like there's like an itch there. There's like a substance behind the words. And I think if you kept going, you might find it. And then we would get it as readers too. And then when you have that, you can craft it down. So it's a hard kind of poems to critique because I feel like they don't really know what they want to do yet, or like why they're being written yet. They haven't discovered their why, but there is a why, which is like sort of half the battle. I mean, a lot of poems don't have that sense that there's a deeper meaning underneath it, and these two poems both do. They just haven't gotten to it yet. They haven't like revealed themselves to the author yet, I would say. Anyway, let's see. Nate Jacob says it feels circular, ending back where it began. Where'd that go? Ending back where it began. Not quite easily enough for me. The meaning is unclear. Sharon Ferrante with another suggestion. Let it travel through the clouds like poetry, trees without leaves in winter. That'd be great. Yeah. Combining these lines would work a lot better. So excellent suggestions. To see these, this is on Facebook. So Spartacus, if you want to see these, go find Facebook comments. Lots of fine images, says Nate Jacobs, but I'm searching for a linkage between them. Why are set into the same stanza, poem, etc.? Yeah, let's see. Look over at YouTube again. Let's see. Somebody said maybe could be less distant if circle back to suffocating. And why suffocating in high walls? That's a good point. Yeah, I kind of forgot that. But this was definitely the best line in the poem. My poems are dreams suffocating behind high walls of unwelcoming cities. That might even be... a suggestion for this might even be just to take this line and just start with this line. My poems are like dreams suffocating behind high walls of unwelcoming cities. And then riff on that, because that's a really good line. Get rid of the shadow stuff. The shadow stuff is just abstract and doesn't really hit home in the same way the suffocating behind high walls of cities does. And I'm not sure if you need unwelcoming either, but possibly. But that's just so much more concrete, no pun intended, those high walls of the cities. And then the shadow and darkness and light interplaying just don't have the same oomph as this one line does. So I would dive into that, is where I dive in. Cindy Botha says, it feels that the poet decided to write a poem about poetry and there's no real epiphany or depth or discovery. Yeah, I feel like there's something underneath there that wants to come out. It just hasn't gotten there yet. Okay. Let's see. Diana Kessel says the poem is basically stating that all the remedies are out of reach. Kimberly McNeil says repeated similes can lose power due to repetition. Yeah, exactly. I would like, Mary Ellen Carr says, I would like a ghost that has lost inspiration, not gotten lost in inspiration. That's an interesting comment. Yeah, so these poems feel just like they haven't found their meaning yet. They're like sort of poems in search of a meaning. And but I feel like the meaning's up there underneath the surface. So I think they could both come out. And I would just, with this one, I would focus on this line. My poems are dreams suffocating behind high walls of unwelcoming cities. And then how else could they be like something to do with these cities? Like extend that metaphor. Like look up walled cities and different words for the walls and the different bricks and the little minarets or whatever. I don't know, like however you envision this, like pull out details and figure out how poetry could be like that. And just keep pushing that image. Because I think the real heart of the poem is in that image, but we don't really know where. Like, why are we suffocating behind those high walls? Or why are the poems? Yeah, let's see. Sharon Ferrante said the last line could also be a great start. It could, yeah. Poetry, like the light waiting to be seen. If that was the beginning and then it got more specific, more concrete after that, I think that would work as a way to keep generating these lines. Sandra Fee says, I appreciate the use of images in both poems. There's some nice auditory moments too. Yeah, totally agree. Like that's what's really going for it, is the image and the rhythm. I think really good for both of these poems. And Dana Castle says, I think he should do the character method acting technique and try getting angry or sad about where his poems are in relation to him. Yeah. Like let it out. Like get into that rhythm. Because I guess what it is a real rhythm to the voice. And it feels like there's something that's compelling the voice out, if that makes sense. I'm being very abstract with it, but that's kind of how it works. So just push it farther, I would say. I think that might be all we have to say about these two poems. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. So that is the critique of the week for this week. Hope it was helpful, Spartakos. I think the like we said, the images and the rhythms are really good in both these poems. There's a real voice behind these that works at just pushing the voice toward what it's trying to say, and not sort of quitting too soon. Maybe is the issue here. But excellent poems to look at. Thanks so much for sharing them. And now, of course, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, if you would like to participate and have two of your poems critiqued, all you have to do is find the link in the show notes, or just go to our Submittable page. You'll see Critique of the Week on Submittable, and you can submit two poems to enter yourself in the drawing. As long as they're open submissions there and you don't withdraw them, they'll always be in the drawing every month. So you only have to do it one time. If you do it multiple times, you'll still only count once, so don't bother with that. But do enter if you would like to participate, and we'll do a drawing after next week's show next Friday. And before I go, let me just tell you that this week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be... Sorry, I didn't push the cough button in time. It's going to be Lois Bear Barr. Her newest book is Biopoesis. She's in the current issue of Rattle. Looking forward to talking to her. The prompt for this week was to write a poem in the limerick meter, or stanza style, or whatever you'd call it. In the limerick stanza, I guess. I never really heard it called a limerick stanza, but that's what we're going to do. Because if you watched last week's show with Wendy Vidalak, somebody asked which poems lend themselves, which meters lend themselves more to humor and more to serious poems, and Wendy happened to say it's really hard to write a serious limerick. And so the prompt for this week is to try to write a serious limerick, or at least a serious poem in that limerick meter, that 5-line stanza, sort of anapestic feet with the anapestic lines with the two iambic lines for 3 and 4. You know what I mean. You know what a limerick is. Write some limericks. And of course, we'll also have the open mic show on Sunday, noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific, for any poems you'd like to share about current events. It's always what we do, going over poems about the news as a way to look at news through poetry. So please do join us for either of those. In the meantime, have a great weekend. Hope you have a good rest of your day too. And I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.